Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning, Miss T. Good morning, Dr. Macfield. Welcome back. We all had a long break.
Yes. So thank you very much, OC, for that very informative opening. I'd also like to thank our listening audience, whether they are here with us in Cayman or in the diaspora. Thank you so much for that opportunity to share this space with us. So, I usually say, or I've said on a number of occasions, that our politicians don't wake up in the morning saying that and thinking about ways in which to harm us. Although we see in the United States, we know that politicians can be liars, they can be misogynistic, they can be narcissistic, etc., etc. But for the most part, I don't think that that's what they do. The same way in which I don't think our children get up and say they want to live a life of crime. And this is touching on the point that you raised when you started the show. Remember, we've seen 15-year-olds being convicted for burglaries. We've seen teenagers allegedly interfering with tourists. And of course, we know how that will affect the economy. But our children and the parents of our children don't wake up every morning saying that we want to ensure that our children don't have jobs. Because most people want to have a salary. Most people want to live. Most people want to enjoy that sense of self-worth. So when we see folks resort to crime, especially our children, OC, especially them, because I am a mother. If I knew any of my children did something like that, my heart would break. Many parents feel that way too, OC. So we have failed our children. We have failed our families. They don't wake up saying they want to live a life of crime. They don't wake up saying they want to go and steal. They don't wake up saying that they want to go and harass the tourists. But cynicism and talking is not going to solve our problems. And I hate having to start this morning with this type of emotive, but I feel it. I feel it in the depths of my heart as a mother. And it has to be more than simply talking about the issue or our politicians being like peacocks and not doing the people a better service. Do what you're being paid for.
Doc, good morning. How are you,
Good morning to you, Mr. For the Record, and good morning
to this morning.
To the co-host, Teresa Pitcairn, and I would like to welcome Mr. Brian.
Yes,
Brian.
Mr. Brian is here.
Our guest this morning to join us, and good morning to all the people in For the Record land, locally, and those that are listening to you abroad. Yes, I am quite disturbed. And it's now that I'm convinced that the dead cannot come back. Perhaps when they hear the voice of Jesus, they probably will rise from the dead as resurrection. But there's not such a thing as a ghost or a dappy. Because if they were, they would be back right here today. Because I can't imagine people like C.A. Hunter, Clifton Hunter, Jim Borden, Haig Borden, Dr. Roy McTaggart, Farrington, Willie Farrington, Berkeley Bush, and
Miss Annie.
Yes, and Miss Annie and Ormond Panton, and all of those great people who stood for us and who steered this country to where it is today. And the people before them, the founding fathers of this country in 1831, when we had a boss man in Jamaica, the governor of Jamaica, imposing their will on Cayman Islands and neglecting us, but still imposing their will. They rallied, and in 1831, on the 10th of December, they formed their own government bringing democracy to this country. A bold step they took. It was illegal, the British government said, but they did it to preserve this country and so forth. And today, yesterday, I was shocked on one other radio station when I confronted one of the MLAs, the one from my constituency, Bordentown West, when I confronted him about not implementing what he promised during his election campaign. And in fact, most of them are still campaigning. His election campaign about implementing the Constitution, Section 119, that says there shall be district councils, advisory district councils in every district to advise the members of the district on various things. And I set out the things that the law said that they should advise them on. And this is not the first advisory district council. In 1956, when Major Donalds came here as commissioner, he set up an advisory district council to help him. Captain T.O., Ormond Panton, Captain Charles Cornell, Mr. Farrington from Westby, all those people were advisors until the 1959 Constitution came into force. They were advising him and so forth. But these politicians of today, they do not want to set up a council to advise them. That politician said yesterday on the radio that is not his priority, that he has his priority. His priority is listening to people who call him on the radio, on his telephone, and listening to them. But implementing the Constitution is not his priority. Well, let me tell every one of them, there ain't going to be a boss man in these constituencies. There ain't going to be any Tivoli Dons here in these constituencies. They are paid to do what the country, what the people in every constituency wishes them to do, not what their priorities are. It's our priorities. And I give them notice from now that is not going to continue here much longer.
Okay, with those words, let us welcome Mr. Brian. You can see what the firing line is going to be like this morning.
Yes,
in here. Good morning, sir. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's been quite a while since you've been here.
Yes, I think I came in the first week of the new year, so it's a pleasure to be back. It's a pleasure to be here in a room of honorable people, in my viewpoint, in respect to the contributions you guys give to the Cayman Islands on a daily basis and over the last few decades. Sadly, there's a number of things that I think we need to discuss this morning that are concerning, and Ms. Pitcairn highlighted a few of them, and I really would want to echo a lot of your thoughts as we continue the show. But some of those are the creeping rise in crime again. Mm-hmm. But I would like to discuss this morning some of the things that we can do as a society to affect crime and really examine what the public can do, what I can do as a legislator, what the government can do as a government, what is the police doing, and what we're doing as a nation, because crime is a very multifaceted issue and cannot be solved by a silver bullet. And the only way for us to address it is actually getting to the root causes of crime, which reminds me of an interview I did with the former police commissioner, David Baines, and he said, Kenneth, this is when I was a television reporter with Cayman 27 News. Mm-hmm. And he said, Kenneth, we only get involved in crime after the crime has already been committed. So you can't blame us for the crime. You need to look at the government and the people in respect to addressing the crime. And, he had a very strong point. So in order to address crime, you have to find out what the causes of crime are. So that's one of the topics I'd like to talk about today. Also, yesterday I had a privilege, the Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly had a education seminar for all the teachers in the school, and I was blown away by the seminar. Quite saddened that there was only 3 legislators there. I must highlight that myself, Miss Julie, and Miss Barbara Connolly, because the information that was provided to everybody in the room was rather important and good. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but I know that we had to go to a break, so talk more about it when we get back.
Yeah, we have to go to a break now, folks. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, and we have with us Mr. Kenneth Bryan, the MLA who represents Georgetown Central in our Legislative Assembly. Off air before this morning, one caller, someone called in and spoke about the recent crimes and attributed some of it to this whole the numbers racket, the numbers game. We know that there's a certain sophistication now to the numbers game. People use their cell phones and they, whoever the bankers or whatever, those sellers call, sending their text messages or whatever, saying what, because they have to get them in a certain time. Because if the number plays, if the number drops, and you haven't sent it in, then, if the person wins, they don't get paid, because if the number drops and you send it in after, you have the ability to trick the system, so they've gotten real sophisticated. We know that Inspector Miles, I'm not sure if it's Inspector or Chief Inspector, but he's back working in the community. And, he has done an excellent job in sort of like stirring things up with them, but it appears as if they move from one place to the other, so they're constantly on the move. Plus, like I said, they have gone electronic now, as well, gone digital. So it is even more difficult. And that is why when some people say maybe the government should look to legalize it in some form or the other, if we wait too long before it happens, it's going to be very difficult to make inroads into it. It's like when horse racing and stuff like that in the United States, in New York, for instance, you could go to the track and you could bet. But if you didn't go to the track, you couldn't do anything else until in the 1970s or 80s. I think it would have been in the 80s when they introduced something called off-track betting. And you could then go to these stores and you could place your bets, and they have the monitors there up there and stuff like that. So the government realized for us to get a hold on to this, we have to engage in it as well. Strong argument for it, but Mr. Bryan, as far as the crime is concerned, we see a lot of it associated with the numbers. There are a lot of robberies that go unreported, or they're reported not the way that they happen, simply because people are targeting the bankers, the people who have they know that have the monies that they've collected from the numbers and stuff. And any insight and comments?
Well, I have to highlight this point first before getting into the conversation. At this stage, we have no idea why the crime. There was a lot of speculation to it. I mean, I've heard the argument of numbers. I've also heard the argument there was some drug deal gone bad. So, I mean, and a lot of this is rumors. And unfortunately, in my position, I cannot make any assumptions, and I have to be more responsible than that and read on information and data. But regardless of what it causes, is a terrible thing that happened. But that being said, you are right in highlighting that the game of numbers, because it's currently illegal, attracts an element of crime around it, because it's black market. Anything illegal has, for lack of better words, dodgy players involved, persons who are maybe willing to do things way outside the law, even outside of numbers itself. So it attracts that
Kenneth,
type of attitude.
Do you think people get up in the mornings and they grow up and they become an adult and they want to engage in a career that's outside the ambit of the norm?
No, I think you're 100% right. What you said before, that when these kids, if you saw a child today who ended up being an armed robber, I bet you if you checked with an aunt or a cousin or an uncle and you said how they were when they were 7 years old, I bet you they're saying, I want to be a police officer or a pilot or a teacher or something. Their dreams and aspirations were lost some way down the line, so we did fail them. So I agree with you in that position.
So you don't think that, and this is to both of you, Ms. Teresa, and that there's some people who are just born with a criminal streak in them?
I can't.
I don't agree with that.
I believe
there are
people who are born with that criminal
born with
streak
some bad chromosomes and DNA.
And just like you go,
That's right.
you can go to a car lot
what
and have a
percentage,
1,000
OC?
and you have 1,000 brand new cars out there, and chances are you can go and pick the one that's a lemon.
That's right.
Brand new
OC,
car coming off the
OC.
assembly line.
What percentage of people you think is born that way? A very
Very small.
So
Very
don't even-
small.
so don't even try that.
I would say a very small, but there are some. There are
just
some.
agreeing with his position. Don't give in to his position.
No.
Because if you're saying there's a percentage, you're agreeing with his position.
I am agreeing that there is a small percent, because I did psychology 101. There's a small percentage that have a certain predisposition, but we are talking about general perceptions and general folks, and you can't say 99% of the people born that way. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and even if I don't agree with that position still, but even if you were to go down that position, the percentages are so small, and it won't be compatible with the percentage of persons who we see being involved in crime now, because I think the percentages are a lot higher of persons involved in crime than what statistics would show based on your argument. But that being said, if you agree with that position, and you're agreeing with the position that a person was born gay or a person was born with some other
And we know that happens too.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's a fact.
Okay, so
that's not my choice.
Well, I don't even want to open up that door, but I think that the judgment is still out in respect to that.
No,
but,
the facts are there in the research, and they're sorry to do that to you.
But
that's the reality.
I think that there's plenty of people who, from a religious standpoint, would disagree with that. But again, I should never have opened that door, to be honest with you. But that being said, I think that there's no disposition that you're born with that care, love, and affection can't fix. So is it fair to say that?
No, because that same 1% that we were talking about, that's simply predisposed to having a certain way and behaving. Even Jesus could come down there and that won't change it.
If that's the position that we're agreeing on, and that's the position that the country and everybody else who's listening agrees on, then there's the percentage out there that you can't do nothing with.
Yeah.
All right, so we can't solve that problem. So it's nobody's fault then. So it's not the community's fault, it's not the police's fault, it's not the government's fault. So we just have to go find them, lock them up, and that's it, right? Is that what we're saying?
But those that we find that can't be rehabilitated in some way or the other, yes, you have to separate them from the rest of society.
I tell you what,
Yes.
I'm going to say this from a matter of position, right? I can bet that there's some people out there who thought that Kenneth Bryan was one of those persons as well.
Stop.
Let me state my position, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was, in my life growing up as a kid, I created the most problems in primary school. I was in and out of homes because of misbehavior, bad attitude, cursing and fighting and the whole lot. And many people would have probably thought that Kenneth was one of those 1% that fell into that. But yet still I'm here on a national radio as a legislator of this country, because eventually throughout my life there are people through God and through love and affection that guided me the right way. So I honestly, from a position of my life and knowing what I've gone through, and half of you in this room have no idea what I've gone through. Matter of fact, funny enough, I just did a what is it called again? A public search, Freedom of Information fax on my social welfare, and funny enough, my family and I had a good old cry of going through the memories of what I went through as a child. So don't say that because of something that people are going through that they can't be good. I don't necessarily agree with that, because I know a lot of the young men.
That's not what we were saying. That's not what we. And we should read Yolanda Ford 101, which talks about criminality.
That's not the argument.
What I said.
The argument is that people are born genetically and chromosomally with bad, and it doesn't matter. For instance, you have pedophiles. You have people who molest people, children. And they put them in jail for 50 years, and they come out today and they will do it again tomorrow.
Okay, so how do you identify those individuals then?
Well,
those are the psychologists and all the
psychiatrists and the scientists do that.
Okay, well, let me put a position out. Let me put a position out there then, and not to.
We have to go to our 8 o'clock news, folks.
Yeah, okay.
When we return, this is a very interesting conversation. We're all becoming psychologists and sociologists and everything this morning, and we will probably continue on that trend for a while. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back immediately after the 8 o'clock. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with us, we have MLA, Mr. Kenneth Bryan, and as you know, he represents the District of Georgetown Central in our Legislative Assembly, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve Macfield. Before we get back into the conversation, one of our listeners has written in and said, let's ask ourselves, why does Cuba, that has far more harsher economic challenges, why is it that Cuba does not have the crime rate that we have? Well, we really don't know what the crime rate in Cuba is because you don't get official statistics in relation to that. It is still a state-controlled country. Media is controlled. When you get news, you get it from Granma, which is the official newspaper in Cuba. The party's newspaper. So we don't know what the figures are. We do know that it is a much more authoritarian society.
It's disciplinary.
It is the only single party state that exists today. Mm-hmm. And the military is always waiting on standby to enforce what the state wants.
And it has the best education system in the Caribbean, one of the best education systems in the world. Mm-hmm. And when you have an educated populace and discipline, you're going to have less crime.
Yeah, but you will never see any figures coming out of Cuba in terms of how many rapes they have, how many murders are committed, or things of that nature. You just don't get it. Just like the old Soviet Union was the same way as well.
Well, I can tell you that I have family there and stuff, and you dare not think about that, even think about those kind of things in Cuba.
Oh yeah, because your civil liberties
will be
limited.
gone.
Yes.
Well,
Mr. Bryan.
I'll just add to that to say, well, obviously we have to look at the environment they live. The person who made that comment highlighted the comparison of saying, well, persons are of low income or less strong surroundings in their economy, like Cayman, why they're not committing the crime. But the environment of the authority there is different, and the pressures are different. They live in a world of fear. One would speculate that much of the crime that is not committed, if you use the theory of, well, there's a certain percentage of people who are ultimately bad no matter what you do, what stops them from doing the genetically element of them to do something bad? And it's the element of fear. So we recognize that fear stops a lot of things. Hence the law is drafted. Many laws are drafted the way they are. Now, if you can get away with murder for a penalty of 6 months, more people would probably kill. So it's the fear of your freedom being lost for so long why people don't do things. So
some people,
for some people. So the concept of fear is what stops people from doing things. Fear of something happening to them,
and it's usually the law-abiding ones that have that fear.
Exactly.
So, and if you're educated, you know the consequences of committing an act that is a deviant act that is against the state.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't necessarily. Yes, I agree. The more educated you are, the more you're better understanding the complexity of what you're going to be doing to yourself. But even those who are not educated and in a high capacity understand right and wrong, and that you can't kill, you can't steal, you can't lie or rob or what have you, rape and the like. So they all know penalties are involved, and you learn that from a very young age. So it's a fear there that there is a no nonsense approach. There's a fear that you can't get away very easily because the systems that are set up in Cuba that your best friend could be a police officer you don't know. I've heard stories that every person on the corner is a police officer in some way, shape, or form, whether with an authority of a badge or they may have the legal rights as a police officer, even just a regular system.
Cuba?
Yeah,
because they belong to the party. Everyone is programmed to look and see what's happening and report it.
Yes. And to protect their communities.
Yeah. So that's that fear that has been set up there. So chances are people are less likely to do that because they believe there's a higher probability of them getting caught. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a factor involved. I wish some of that fear, not to the severe magnitude as it is in Cuba, but I wish people feared that, boy, I couldn't just walk into a shop broad day with a gun and hold it up. because every single soul around me will be watching my shoes, my pants, my color, my skin, and looking for a way to get back information to the police. But obviously that's not like that here.
Let's talk about the practical situation, Mr. Bryan. We've been talking theory for a while, but let's talk about the practical. Eastern Avenue.
Yes.
There are many legitimate businesses on Eastern Avenue, reputable, efficient businesses.
Yes.
There are a lot of some front businesses as well. Last night I was going home from Rockall. What was it? Minutes to 10? After 10 o'clock? Barber shop is still open. I don't go and get my hair cut at 10 o'clock in the night. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that not many women are going out there, to get their hair done at night and stuff like that. What are they doing open? Reminds me of, my days in New York, the bodegas. Mm-hmm. And, they would have one of everything, a can of pork and bean, a can of corned beef, a package of sugar, just the shelves all stacked up just to look like a grocery store. Mm-hmm. But they were selling numbers. They were selling drugs, and stuff like that. They're fronts. We have some of those. We need to clean up areas like Eastern Avenue and some places in the central area. They need to be cleaned up before they become
a Tivoli.
Cayman's Tivoli Garden.
And we don't want, and the excuse is, it's Little Jamaica. We don't want a Little Jamaica. We want a pro-Caymanian neighborhood. And the problem is that I do not see anybody taking cognizance of what's happening in those neighborhoods. I see that they're putting sidewalks and stuff in South Sound. That's a priority. It's costing a lot of money, but I don't see any policemen on foot in Eastern Avenue keeping the peace and walking the beat in Rockall. I don't see that happening. So it seems to me it's an old throwback from slavery. The people who are important are the master class, the dons, the master class, and we do not want any master class in Cayman or any dons class in Cayman.
Mr. Bryan?
And that's the problem that we have. Now, I just want to address something that Mr. Bryan said off the air.
Okay.
He was saying, why is it that I do not confront the premier in forming the district councils? Well, I would like to bring to Mr. Bryan's attention Section 14.4 of the law. It says that the governing cabinet shall appoint the councils, but it also says the recommendation for the council shall come from within the electoral districts. Mm-hmm. In Bordentown West, we were waiting for the elected member there to have the district council, the Bordentowners and Bordentowners West, to make their recommendations. He has refused to do so, and he says it's not his priority. Well, I can send a message to him this morning. We in Bordentown West are going to make the recommendations ourselves. Mm-hmm. We are going to get together, and we are going to appoint our election for our district council, and we are going to send those recommendations to the premier for him to appoint them. Okay,
Dr. McFeel, if you can spare me a minute here, Mr. Bryan, because I'm going to ask Dr. McFeel a hard question, as well this morning. This one is coming out from left field. No prior indication it was coming. We know that you were intricately involved in the drafting.
That's right.
Of the legislation. Yes. We had a discussion yesterday, and we couldn't understand, and we disagreed. And this was at the Rockall Advisory District Council.
yes. At least you have one.
Rockall Advisory District Council, right? Even though I reside in Lower Valley, but my heart is in Rockall. The need for cabinet to have to approve what a member of our legislative assembly brings forward in terms of the names of the people who have been chosen in his constituency. Why does cabinet have to get involved in approving those appointments? That makes it political.
Exactly.
What was the driving force behind that?
Well, it's because it's advisory, and if it's a district council, it's if you look at all the district councils where we took the law from, it's usually the government that appoints them to advise the members who are from that district.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that it has to be for the governor and council, because we can change it.
Yeah, I think it should, because
we can change it.
It gives the cabinet the power to override what MLA
yes,
has put forward.
I agree with that, and that could take a good amendment, along with some other amendments since the one man one vote came into force.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to quickly say I understand,
but until the law is amended, we should abide by it.
Okay. Well, this is the problem that we have, because I understand where Chris is coming from, right? The Premier has outrightly said directly in Parliament, face-to-face meetings, that he has no intentions whatsoever to implement the law in its current form. He's publicly said that. He's privately said that. Unfortunately, Dr. Macfield has not been there in discussions with myself or my colleague Christopher Saunders in our intentions or our want to implement this law. But if you have the Premier of the country who says, I don't care how many recommendations you bring, I'm not implementing it, period. Tell me what we are supposed to do.
Then what you're supposed to do, then you and Chris and the others, you are supposed to bring amendments to the law.
But this is where we're at, Mr. Macfield. The tensions are to bring amendments to the law, and it's been discussed that will happen this year.
But you have been elected since May last year.
Well, we're not in control of when the Parliament meets. You know that the Premier does that. You are a constitutional drafter yourself. You know that they're in charge of when the Parliament meets.
You should have had amendments already.
I think what you need to do is start to focus your efforts on where the power does lie, and you know where it lies, in front of Mr. McLaughlin.
The power lies in the
legislature. We have a couple of calls. We're going to take those calls, and we'll continue that part of the conversation off air. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, O.C. Happy New Year to you and your panel, and to Mr. Macfield and Teresa and Kenneth.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Thanks very much. The reason I'm calling this morning, I just want to find out if I am the only person on this island that, since Canada is there, have a problem with these roundabouts that are being built. I need to know who are doing the design. Does anybody on this island or on the face of the earth knows who are designing these roundabouts? And do they have any idea what it's going to cost us, the people of this country, long term? Mm-hmm. And I'd like to just touch on another thing. Have y'all noticed what Mr. Dart has done going into Cayman Bay?
Tell us. I've noticed quite a few things down there, actually.
Yeah, well, what he has done, I've noticed, I don't know if a lot of people have picked up on it, he has 3 lanes going into Cayman Bay, and he got 4 entranceways into Cayman Bay. And how much exit ways does he have coming out of leaving Cayman Bay? He has 2 lanes to travel on. So I take my hat off to that gentleman because he did a brilliant job. And the way I look at it is once he can do everything within his power to get you to Cayman Bay, and he could care less how you leave.
3 to get in and 2 to leave.
3 to get in and 2 to leave. That's my take on it.
So what is your complaint in relation to the roundabouts that are being built by and designed by the National Roads Authority?
The roundabout by Kirk Motors, Napa. Does anybody have any issues with the efficiency of how that works? I drive there 3-4 times a day, and that little roundabout is not even 1/3 of the size of these islands that they are building that they call roundabouts. They're not roundabouts, they're islands. Mm-hmm. Okay? And the upkeep of them, who's going to pay for that? We have to pay for it. The things are totally dangerous, and there's no reason in the world for a roundabout to be the size that they are building these things. And I am totally against it.
So you're saying they're too big? They're too big?
They're definitely too big. Anybody that has traveled the world and have had to deal with roundabouts can call you and tell you this. I've been all over the world. I've drove roundabouts all over the world. And people don't even know that there's a roundabout in Florida. Right? I drove that. Because 99.9% of the people in this country, if you ask them if they see a roundabout in Florida, they'll tell you no, they have never seen it.
You're seeing more and
But
more of them in the U.S. now, though. More and more of them. They're resorting to them in the U.S.
Yeah, they're starting now within the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're becoming real popular. But, I was just concerned if I was the oldest one that, really have a serious problem with these roundabouts.
Okay.
So I know it's not on the topic, but if you all get a chance to comment, I mean,
We certainly will.
fine.
We certainly will. If not, when we have the action man on here, we will talk about that as well.
I'll just add quickly to the. Oh, got another call.
We have to go to a commercial break now. We have 2 callers on hold, and we're going to a commercial break, but we will squeeze you in there, Mr. Bryan. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Mr. Kenneth Bryan, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve MacPhail. We're going to go to our callers, but I want to give Mr. Bryan an opportunity to comment on what was said last before we go to the callers.
Yes, quickly, just to say that the Action Man would probably have a better informed position in respect to this, but with respect to the caller, what the caller said about the roundabouts and the efficiency of them and who want to pay for the upkeep, I think that there's a learning curve about the roundabouts because it's only been a recent phenomenon over the last decade or two. So there needs to be more education about it, and then we have to have self-responsibility to try to understand them more. Even me and my mom discussed that. I said, Mom, you got to try, you got to at least give it a little try and understand how it works. But from an upkeep's perspective, if we had put stoplights there, it would have been more costly to the country by way of having to pay for the lights to constantly go 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So once these roundabouts are implemented, they're self-sufficient. The only thing they'd upkeep is a repaint every once a year or something like that. So from that perspective, I appreciate the roundabout from that concern, but I think what the caller is suggesting is that sometimes they're confusing and not as efficient, and obviously nobody gets it right, but if there's a particular concern that you have, I think you would write it into the NRA in respect to the particular one you're talking about.
Yeah. And just for, very quickly, because we have 4 callers, the maintenance of those roundabouts, I see roundabouts as being, when you're driving on them, that you're able to view the complete roundabout. We have a tendency here in the Cayman Islands to decorate them, to put trees and everything. You should have a full view of the roundabout so you can actually see traffic that is on the roundabout, not only when it's immediately to your right or to your left or whatever, but you can see it from afar.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we want to decorate everything as well. Let's go to the callers. 4 callers. What we're going to do, take as many calls as we can, comment afterwards, and we ask all callers to be as brief as possible. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, guys. This is Ken McTaggart.
Good morning.
Just spare all the niceties. I appreciate the conversation, each one of you being there. I wanted to touch base on the advisory district council,
okay,
and especially in regards to Mr. Saunders, because yesterday on another show I actually called in and kind of gave him a little bit of down the road about it. But after I'd hung up, and I say this because I've been listening this morning. After I'd hung up, Mr. Saunders had indicated that he plans on implementing his district advisory council. It's not the top of his list of priorities, but he actually indicated how he intended to implement that also, which is a darn sight more than I can say any other MLA has done to this date. And in fact, he actually gave a deadline as to when he would have his up and running. So I don't know if the specific criticizing of Mr. Saunders and Bordentown West is actually appropriate, because he had put that all there, and within his first, let's say, 18 months of being in office, he has indicated that he will have this up and running. Now, if that goes by and he doesn't, I would say, okay, put his feet to the fire. However, we've got several in there, including our present premier and whatnot, that have been in for many, many terms and were part of actually bringing this in, who have not implemented these things, and I think holding them to the fire is a little more appropriate to ensure that not only one or two, but all of them get going, because this has to be driven from the top down. One of the mistakes that I see in this whole thing is that it was left up to the individual representatives to engage these, rather than that being kind of held at a higher level and being implemented, and then the elected official from that constituency then falls in and is essentially the messenger. But I just want to throw that out there because it's hard to prioritize. There's people. Everybody makes campaign promises, and one thing I can tell you is that Chris, being a new type of politician, is that he's actually trying to do what he can do from the position that he's at, and I'm the first one to hold him accountable. But certainly, we can start throwing stones at other things and encourage people rather than just chopping it down. So, anyways, I'll just leave it there, and you guys can comment, burn me, whatever. But he specifically said that there was a timeline and how he's going to implement it, and I don't recall anything being specified in the Constitution about either one of those things, but he's actually put that forward. So I'll leave that there.
Okay. Well, when you get a chance, Dr. McPhee, we'll get you to explain to everyone what the word shall means.
Exactly.
When it says that there shall be.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean there may be tomorrow or the next day or in 2 weeks' time. Shall be. Shall be. Let's go to the next caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, sir. Morning. How's the brat?
Fine. Beautiful weather.
Uh-huh.
I just want to call this morning to find out about the gentleman that shot his wife and children in California.
Florida.
I understand that we
Florida?
Yes, in Florida, wherever it was, yeah. I understand that he's here,
mm-hmm.
and we spending our tax money to put lawyer for him. But as far as I'm concerned, we don't need to waste our time. The government or immigration should have called the United States and asked them to send an FBI agent down here to pick him up and take him back to the States.
Mm-hmm.
He shouldn't even be here right now. I mean, he's supposed to be back to go his trial and solve his time or whatever we're going to do with him. Because I know he's probably trying to get to live here. How you can live in a country that a man that shot his child, woman 8 months pregnant and shot his child, and her, and come and run here?
Yep, there are several who share your sentiment as well, and we will certainly elaborate on what you have said, and we'll explain. We have done it on one of our previous shows, but we will do it again for the benefit of our listening and viewing audience. Thank you very much for that caller. Let's grab another caller. Good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Orman here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. My good friend, I don't call him doctor. I know he's a doctor, but I just say Steve because we associate a lot.
Yes.
A little thing that I see when we're talking about what we're missing in moving Cayman forward. I listened yesterday to the music of Mr. Dexter Borden. I feel so disappointed that people in position in this island, on radio shows and so on, are not promoting our own legends. That man has a voice that would make Waylon Jennings look like something else. When I listen to his music and see that man has been, for the want of a better word, sort of rejected, why? Why did we not get around him many years ago? He could have been a big star into this island. Our own Caymanians are left out while we go and promote music from other countries, like Warner Recording. They play them every day, all day, from someplace else. And that's what I want to say, that while we talk, we do not do the walk. Why are we not being more supportive of our own Caymanians and trying to promote them? It's so disappointing, disgusting what I see into this island about our own people. So I know maybe that's not the topic, but at least it blends in with some of what we're talking about, district councils and so on. Our own people must come first, and they should come first. And it is us to take, the torch and say, look, we're going to support our people. So I just want to say, guys, thank you so much for listening to me, and have a pleasant day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, caller, as well. And I first would like to say also, I see reports are out now that Mr. Dexter Borden is doing much better. He's out of that critical area that he was in, and that is good to know. Let's see if we can grab one more caller before the break. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning again, OC. I had to call back just
Sure.
to make a quick comment. I totally agree with everything you said about the roundabouts, but Mr. Bryan, I can't agree with the comments that he made. There's a lot more than the upkeep of the roundabouts. They're not only just painting it, and furthermore, I did not suggest anything about light. My issues are with the roundabouts that they are too big and you cannot see the lanes from the other side when you are approaching the roundabout. You should be able to see the lanes that you're going to be traveling into so you don't run into the next car or get totally confused when you're going around the roundabout. They are simply too big, and furthermore, it's the upkeep of them will be topsoil and fill, a lot of fill that have to go in there, and there's going to have to be a lot of grass.
And water.
So there will always be people there cutting grass.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, caller.
If I don't want the caller to think that I was disagreeing with him. I just wasn't sure what the criticism was in respect to it. If you have a concern, you have a justified reason to highlight that concern. The only thing I had heard was the upkeep part. So I was thinking that once it's implemented, there's not much of an upkeep other than the painting. Like for ones that there's no grass. The grassed area ones are usually sponsored, and whichever that sponsor is the one paying for the upkeep. But in respect to how big they are and the functionality of it, yes, you are 100% right, caller, that sometimes they don't function as easy as we would like. And that's what I'm saying. If there's a specific roundabout that you're speaking of, maybe you can bring those concerns to the NRA, because I'm not sure. I mean, each one may have a different issue in the mind of the driver. So by all means, I agree with you, caller. I wasn't trying to undermine your comments, and I do thank you for calling in.
One of our listeners says to tell Dr. McPhail that the police walk Eastern Avenue and also Rock Hole. It has to be what those old people would say, few and far apart.
Yes, few and far apart, because I haven't seen them.
Or Blue Moon.
I haven't seen them. Every Blue Moon.
I think that Mr. Miles has a strong indication of wanting to increase the numbers of foot patrol in that area.
Yes.
But I can't say, and I am a person who's on the ground. I go through Eastern Avenue and Shedden Road at least 7 times per day. I go through my constituency at least 7 times per day. Now, in respect to the Crew Road area and off roads or residential, not really. But I'm lucky to have that my constituency is in the central town area. So I'm forced to, whether I like to or not. And I can't say that I see it that often, not often enough at least. And I probably have seen them patrol not even once this year yet. But that doesn't mean I didn't do it. I just haven't seen it. And I'm quite often in my constituency. So, but I know Mr. Miles have every intention of increasing those numbers in respect to visibility.
Yeah. I mean, the other day we were having a conversation again in Rock Hole, and they were talking about the fact that someone was sitting in the area where we're normally at. They saw someone with 2 guys with some black bags, looked suspicious and everything. They suspected that some robbery had taken place or something. Few minutes later, the police car comes in there, drives in, looks around, drives out, but doesn't stop, put the window down and ask the people who were sitting there, did you see anything suspicious or anything like that?
Yes,
so they were unable, to tell them anything because they didn't stop.
Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? It's because the police who were driving the cars have no affiliation with that neighborhood. That is one of the reasons. They have no affiliation with the neighborhoods, and so they're not concerned with you or the people in the neighborhood. That's the problem that we have with policing in the country.
Strong neighborhood policing we need. We're going to take a commercial break. Folks, please stay tuned for The Record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For The Record. We don't have any calls, but I think Mr. Bryan has one call, but Mr. Bryan has to rush off. And I just want to say also that Hugh Masekela, Does that name ring a bell?
Yes.
No, unfortunately not for this young
Passed away, South African
at 79.
Musician. Have you heard of the lady Miriam Makeba? He was married to Miriam Makeba.
Yes.
Okay.
Before he was only 70-something years old.
79.
79.
Yes, as well. So he's passed away.
Speaking of age, that reminded me of how strong I saw Mr. Markfield, Dr. Markfield, boasting through on Heroes Day, and I said, man, he's 80-odd, man. Look how strong and boastful he is. He was just walking up to go take his picture. Yeah. I'm proud of you for your age and your man. That being said, I unfortunately have to leave now early because there is a situation that is happening at the Westin that I'm concerned about. A number of my constituents work at that location. There seems to be a strike of some sort. I'm going to go down there and see if I can try to get an understanding or some resolve to the matter. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I thank you for the involvement in the discussion. It's always strong, and though we not always necessarily agree, it's always robust, and I think the listeners get a lot out of what we talk about, even if something to think about. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and the callers, I appreciate it. God bless the Caymanans. God bless each and every one of you.
And when we speak of strike, we're not talking about a lightning strike. We're not talking about an aerial strike. We're talking about industrial action.
Yes.
Well, this reminds me when you read the history of labor of labor unions in the industrial world. This is how they start. They start with imbalance. They start with people being put down. They start with people not being paid a decent wage, a living wage. And it's only a matter of time.
Yes, I agree with
It's
that.
only a matter of time when the same thing's going to happen to Cayman, when Cayman's going to have their unions.
Good luck with that. Keep us up to speed on what's happening down there as well. We have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC, and good morning to your co-host. This is Gilbert McLean.
Good morning, Mr. McLean. How are you?
How are you?
I am doing well, thanks. I've been listening to the show, and I wanted to comment on 2 points.
Sure.
One relating to the formation of the district council that Mr. McFeel has been raising time and again on every opportunity he has, and pointing out that the Constitution says that it shall be, which means there is no in between. It shall be, it should be done, and done with alacrity. But I found it fascinating when MLA Mr. Bryan spoke about what the Premier has said, that the Premier says he will not pass or act on this in its present form. Well, if he won't act on it in its present form, and I happen to agree that although he was part of it when it was originally done, when it was being negotiated in England, that it should be elected. The people on that council should be elected within each constituency. I personally subscribe and believe that. But it doesn't matter when the Premier may call the House, and that is done at whim and fancy. Now it's no longer where there are clearly 4 sessions and the first business of the year is setting when the House is going to be in operation. But the opposition members can take a motion with amendments to the present law.
Yes.
And whether or not it is passed, whether it is supported or not, there's the opportunity of a national debate. That is what legislative process is all about. It don't have to wait because the Premier says he will not implement it. Well, if he won't implement it and if he won't bring the amendment, then the opportunity is there for other legislators to bring an amendment and have it debated. Let the government shoot it down. The people will have the opportunity of hearing why they won't accept it and all the rest of it. That is legislative process. Anyway, the second point is that of the roundabout. And, I totally agree with what you say about roundabouts. I've seen, the first time I ever saw them was in England, and I don't see any trees and semi-buildings and whatnot in the middle of them obstructing the view. And unless it is changed, there used to be a clause in the roads law which said that spoke about obstructions in the road, which also had to deal with being able to visibility, because there's some that's being built down there in Cayman Bay now. There's some by the Cayman Business Park that you're going around them, and you're hoping things will be okay when you as you make turn. But there should be no obstruction to the roundabout. It's something which is to help the flow of traffic, not to block the vision of drivers as forming part of the traffic. Anyway, folks, they were just my thoughts. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. McLean. Your comments certainly are extremely insightful as well. One more caller. Let's go to the phone lines again. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC.
Good morning. How's it going, Lord?
I'm good.
Good morning, Lord Graham.
Yeah, and good morning to the doctor there, and good morning to Reese.
Morning.
OC, I heard you mention Hugh Masekela a while ago, so I had to call in. I'm a little surprised that Mr. Brian didn't know.
Hey, he's a little bit young. He's a little young for that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Miriam McKeever. Hugh Masekela actually was in exile. Couldn't go back to his country for at least 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, due to
apartheid.
Yes.
Yeah, apartheid time. And the reason he got into he was always musically inclined. He was an activist, and then one of the government enforcers, asked him one time. He said, "What would we have to do for you to, carve your ways, stop protesting?" He said, "Buy me a trumpet, and I'll never trouble you again." And that was how he got into playing the trumpet. And the individual that bought him the trumpet also paid a tutor to teach him how to play the trumpet. So that's a little bit about Hugh Masekela.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to last week, the gentleman that's here being detained, waiting to be extradited or fighting extradition. Back in the day, like I would say, where is Mr. Jim Borden when you most need him?
Mm-hmm.
He would have done like a round robin kind of thing, even if he couldn't round up the guys, and then he would have called Bostock, and that individual would have been out of here. So I don't want to go too much on that. And one Warren Conley once said that Cayman is not for everybody. And I had an individual, Mr. Superintendent Val Anderson, personally told me, he says, "Sonny, the day you see we bring in an influx of other people into our police force," he said, "dog will be better than us." And then I got caught another gentleman, Mr. David Rich, once said, "If we don't be careful, we will turn Cayman into a welfare state." They said that he was racist. Now the chickens are coming home to roost, and we can't deal with it. I gotta go.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Lord Graham.
Lord Graham. One more call before the 9 o'clock break. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning,
and
Ron.
Good morning.
Good morning, Miss Teresa. We're talking about roundabouts and everything that is concerning. You should make a show just special for roundabouts. But it's so good to hear that people are interested in what is happening to our island, and it looks like we can talk till the roosters come home, and it doesn't get to the ears of our representatives at all. It don't seem so. The roundabout that is coming off the bridge into West Bay, I got an email already. That's Little Cayman, because that is the biggest roundabout I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen quite a few in my travels. What I'm also concerned about is the medians in these new roads that Mr. Dart is putting down, they all have huge trees. Some even have birch trees, if you all notice. And I'm thinking, just planted in a medium, these are strong trees. And in case of bad weather, where you think those trees that is going to grow real fast, they're already big, going to grow real fast. That could be a blockage for the road.
And birch trees aren't the strongest in the world either.
Yes, and the thing and the thing about it, we got all these representatives and nobody is saying anything. No one is saying anything. What they could be doing is, for instance, down here in West Bay, our clinic badly need painting. Now, in the front of the clinic, on the road, you got more yellow than yellow can be. Every little piece of cement is yellow. Yellow, yellow. But yet our clinic sidewalks are badly in need of painting, pressure washing, the main clinic itself need to be painted. I beg Rotary. No politician in West Bay, we don't even see them. Beg Rotary Central to put down a bench there for people to sit on when they were waiting for their transportation. After all, they wouldn't be there if they weren't feeling sick or they weren't sick.
Yeah. Caller, we have to cut you there. I want to thank you. We have to go to the 9 o'clock news. We're actually a little bit past it now, and we're sorry to cut you off there, but we have to go to our headline news at 9 o'clock. Please feel free to rejoin us after 9 o'clock if you so wish. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. We have one caller. Before we go to the phone lines, though, I want to address one portion of not the last caller, but the caller before that spoke about two things. One about the extradition, and we'll discuss that later on with Dr. Steve Macfield again. But also, if Jim Borden was around, what Jim Borden would do. We in the Caribbean, one of the qualities that we like about our political leaders is that they're strong, they're forceful. They will take things into their own hands and they will do it and they will get it done. I would say, and I say this without any fear of contradiction, that if the Honorable Jim Borden, one of our national heroes, if he were operating in today's society, in today's Cayman, with the Constitution that we have, with all of the additional protections and that we have, with all of the accountabilities that we have, some of the things that he did in his day, he would not get away with it today. So while we do like strong leaders, we like leaders who are prepared to take the reins or take the, and steer and go whatever direction they feel that we should go, every leader should be subject to the laws and subjected to the laws of the country as well. So, yes, Mr. Jim Borden was good. He got things done. But some of the things that he did, he would not get away with it in today's world. Dr. Macfield, any comments on that?
Oh, no, because but he would be better off today. Mm-hmm. With the advanced constitution that we have today. Yeah. He would have been better off today.
You have some tools there to work with.
He'll have some tools to work with. He wouldn't get away with some of the things he did before. But let's talk about the extradition, okay?
Well, we have the caller, so let's take the caller first, then we can come to the extradition. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Fine. Good morning to you, panel.
Good morning.
And happy belated birthday, Mr. Maxfield.
Thank you, ma'am.
And when I hang up, you can tell me what that drink is that you've been drinking.
Thank you.
But I don't want to hear it now because I don't want OC.
That's like the Coca-Cola recipe.
Yes.
You know, it's a top secret. You can't, he has that all locked away in a safe in terms of, because it's not just the ingredients, but it's which ingredient you put in first. You know, if you put the wrong one in first, you don't get the same thing too, you know?
Okay, I see. Yes, I just want to say that, you know, talking about all these roundabouts and these all the trees, the first tree, there are some dangerous trees because when they break, they split from in the middle.
Yep.
Because they've practically got something growing in between them and another tree of some form, you know. So I say that with all these roundabouts that we're making here, from what I gathered a few minutes ago with Brian, please forgive if I'm wrong, it's cheaper to have the roundabouts than have the lights on the street, apparently. But the roundabouts are really dangerous, left, right, and center. Because, and another thing, people not even using the indicators. And then when you got to come around that huge roundabout at Cayman Bay to get over to the left lane to go back up onto the bypass, go back into town, whatever that what road called again, an acceptable highway. Mm-hmm. You got to cross like 3 lanes to get over there, and you got cars coming behind you from the opposite direction. And I just want to say that I don't know who's going to listen to me, but these trees that is in various places throughout this island, they need to be maintained. And I said before again, if the owner do not maintain them, somebody to put a lien on their property to get these trees maintained because they got no business hanging out in Main Street. If we have a disaster, we will not be able to get from point A to point B in that category. And Mr. OC, the lights of the vehicles on the road.
Oh, God.
They are ridiculous. And coming out here from New Orleans every morning, 6:30 to go to my job peacefully. I got cars coming, want to overtake me on a 1 lane going down. And they drive it up on your bumper until it gets all the way down to Thomason roundabout. I don't know what we're going to do about all these vehicles on our road, but I tell you the next 5 years, it's going to be more than road rage out here. And people who are there walking and riding, they need to put something reflection on them because they're going to get hurt. Yep. There's a gentleman riding a motorbike this morning with no light on the back of his motorbike. But when he braked, the brake came on and the indicator came on, but no light while he's driving. And a lot of other trucks and cars are having the same problem. People are taking these roads for a joke. So I just want to leave you all with that.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. Yeah, talking about the headlights, I am convinced that there are drivers who do not know what a dip switch is on a car, that they don't know that it is there. Yes. In the old days, the old cars that used to be on the floor, and if it was a left-hand drive car, it would be on the left side. So you took your left foot and you would hit it, press that button on the floor with your foot to dim your lights. In the new cars now, it is located on the indicator. And this is for all of you out there who don't know where the dim switch is. It is on your indicator. So where you would push up and down, up to go right and down to go indicate that you're going left, it's in and out on that same switch. They've even gotten more sophisticated now. The newer cars, they automatically dim their lights and stuff like that. But the people are ridiculous on the road when it comes to that. Really ridiculous. Extradition, Dr. Macfield.
Well,
one more caller? Okay, I shouldn't say it that way. It sounds like one more caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, boss. Happy New Year to you, Mr. O.C.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
One question. The roundabout by A.L. Thompson, that belongs to CME, right?
Well, they maintain it.
Then I got some big old trees in front of that roundabout.
Almost all of them have the big trees. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Up and by King Sports Center and Lion Center as well.
Which one got the biggest? Not right by A.L. Thompson.
Quite possibly.
And why no boy not complaining about that? Why are boy complaining?
They're complaining about all of them.
Roundabouts.
All right. Because
all of them.
I just came on. I heard the one by the Cayman Bay.
No. They're complaining about all of them. The view is that on the roundabouts you really should be able to see clearly around the whole roundabout rather than having your view obstructed.
Yeah. But the worst one is right by the Pebble Beach, and they got smaller trees. If you drive it coming up, like you come into Pebble Beach, those are small plants, you can't see no cars coming from your right.
Right.
And there is a short tree there, but something about these big or tall trees. But the tall tree, you got vision because the higher, these are short one. You come West Bay again, you in about a little West Bay, you drive that way in the short trees. When you get there, I know you're supposed to slow down roundabout, but that's the worst roundabout right there. And I'm not complaining against nobody, but that's the worst one. And them trees might be about 3 feet tall. Them little plants there, you can't see them. I'd rather tall trees than them short trees where you can have vision through the trees, but them little flower plants, you can't do it. So that's the only one you need to do something with.
Okay. I'm trusting that someone from National Roads Authority will, either send us a text message or something, or someone call in and give us a strong justification for the type of beautification that they do around those roundabouts, roundabouts as well. One more caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, O.C.
Hi, morning. How are you doing?
Good, man. Morning, Dr. Steve.
Good morning, sir.
Mr. Risa is here too.
Yeah, Mr. Risa, sorry, man. Excuse me, sorry. I said about the lights. When they start, the bulbs are illegal, the LED or something. That's what they are. When I spoke to the police in Cayman, you know what they told me? It's just a handful of them. Now, in the night in Cayman, you're blinded. The lights are illegal. And all the police got to do, like when they stop to check your ticket on your registration, insurance, please turn on your lights. If you turn on your lights in the wrong, give you $100. Every time I see you, I will take $100 from you. But we have fools on the road and no one to uphold the law. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, caller. Agree wholeheartedly with you on that. Dr. McPhail, extradition.
Well, extradition is a matter of treaty between international countries. There's also a form of extradition. We don't call it extradition. We call it sending a fugitive back to a country. That's within the Commonwealth. It's called the Fugitive Offenders Law.
Okay.
That is a different understanding between the Commonwealth countries. Now, what has happened?
I think the EU probably has something like
EU
that.
have something like that too.
Yes.
What has happened now with this gentleman who came here now? The reason why we got into this position. As I understand it, I don't know whether I am correct or not. Perhaps someone could call in and tell me I'm not correct or agree with me. But as I understand it, the gentleman is accused of committing a crime in Florida. And the gentleman found himself here as a guest of someone in Prospect. I understand, not as a hotel guest, but as a guest of some family in Prospect,
in a private home.
Private home. Now, I understand it that after the crime was committed, and after he became a fugitive from justice in America, from arrest in America, that information was known to our law enforcement. That information was known to our law enforcement even before the extradition request was made. That information that he was a fugitive and that he had committed some murders in Florida was known to us before the request was made.
That he was accused of.
Now, that information, as I understood, was reliable information from the police and from the Homeland Department in the United States. There is something in our immigration law that says that the cabinet can make a person prohibited, can make a prohibited order against someone from any information, that reliable information that person's presence or arrival in Cayman is not within the best interest of the Cayman Islands. I don't understand why when they got that information, that was reliable information that they did not brought that section into force and made him a prohibited person and put him on a flight and sent him out of the country immediately. Mm-hmm. It would have been much easier and much less costlier than us paying our taxpayers' money to for him to fight extradition back to the United States where he's wanted for trial on a matter.
But we discussed some of the nuances of that the other day, Dr. McPhail, in terms of whether or not we would have had the ability to send him back to the U.S., especially if he was the citizen of another country.
Well, the problem is he came from the U.S. He has a green card, and that's the place where we should have returned him back as not on extradition, but as a prohibited person. He should have gone back to the port that he arrived from.
Now that he's here,
yes.
We have some people complaining about the fact that we now have to pay, possibly if he cannot afford his own legal representation, that we would have to pay it.
That's the law.
Yes, exactly.
That's the law, and that's the procedure.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's the law, and that's the procedure, and we have to abide by that law and procedure now, because now a request has been made to send him back, and he's fighting the request to be returned. And so he's entitled to have legal representation. And if he hasn't got money to pay for it, the government has to pay for that legal representation for him.
Okay. We have one caller, still Ms. Susan. Just a break now. No callers. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We're going to close off the phone lines now. We have about 10, 12 minutes left. Want to give our panel in here an opportunity to have some discussions as well. Mr. Bryan has left us. He had to go. I think he's heading down to the West End to see what's happening there. One of our listeners has written in and said, I must agree with MLA Bryan in what he said. He says, I have lived in Cuba for 4 years. It is fair why crimes are not committed more in Cuba. Imagine going to prison for 5 years for stealing a chicken. Imagine going to prison for 10 years for a stick of weed. Imagine men cannot congregate in the streets unless being picked up and taken to prison. No one lines up inside a bank. They line up outside, and 7 are taken in one door while 7 exit another door. Good place, communists, but love it. Much discipline and no nonsense attitude from the authorities. They treat visitors exceptionally good as well. Yes, but those of us who are accustomed to living in a free society where individual rights are protected, I believe
supposed to be protected.
Are supposed to be protected, yeah. I believe that while we still want law and order, we would not want to operate in a society like that, because you can say to yourself, okay, they're now dealing that way with the criminal or the potential criminal. How will they deal with me? When will they deal with me, and how?
Yes.
As well. So we have to be extremely careful with that. I throw that on the table. Ms. Teresa, you've been so quiet. I'm going to hear from you.
Well, my concern, is, and I've raised it often on this show, is the role of criminality and unemployment. And so crime is the bottleneck to growth. And high crime rates evolves into a vicious cycle, because when young people struggle with the lack of economic opportunities, they turn to illegal activities, and this further depresses growth. I was reading an article sometime last year where Christine Lagarde, who is the managing director for the IMF, exactly, she was saying that youth unemployment in the Caribbean is the highest in the world. And this obviously fuels criminality. And, we in Cayman are not insulated from this, because we sell ourselves as the country of milk and honey, where people can come here, and not only the professionals who, assist us with developing the economy, The folks who are involved in criminality also view Cayman as the perfect place or land of milk and honey to come and be a free-for-all and do as they like. So we have that criminal element that is foreign, and we're now, Dr. McFeel has been talking about securing our borders, ad nauseum now. And then we have the criminal element with our kids, and this is where my heart is. As I started the show, I said the 15-year-old that was accused of burglaries, he's 15, he's just a kid, and he didn't wake up or grow up thinking that, he wanted to commit a crime. That just wasn't, we stole his dream or the potential dream that he had. The kids that are out there on the beach now that are harassing the tourists, and that is one of the mainstays of our economy, our tourism product and the service industry. Those kids, they didn't say they just wanted to wake up and go out there and steal. I have said over and over and over and over on this show, we have failed our people by not putting our people first. I've said it over and over and over. And this morning, as I say it again, I caution about the blood on the streets. We see what happened this past weekend with what transpired. I was hoping that we would be smart enough, and put all of the minds and resources that we had together and to try and come up with useful solutions. We still don't have a plan about dealing with criminality in our community. And that Yolanda Ford report, I should say, where she spoke of the criminalization of our community, that was done in 2006. This is now 2018. 2000. There is something about us that, and I just can't begin to understand it. Again, OC, I was talking to someone recently about you and your experience in immigration. And, we got into a heated argument, this individual and I, about your role and in inviting your expertise to assist us in developing a proper policy and getting a group of people together who can deliver on that. And, why don't we use you and persons like you to do what we know is right? I don't know when we're going to get to that place where we put our egos aside and simply say, look, this person is good at what he or she does. I may not like them. I may not like their politics. But what we share in common is a heart that wants what is right for this country. And I say this country, not isolating Caymanians from non-Caymanians, because that is a fruitless conversation on that level. This is about putting our country first, identifying folks who we know can get the job done and do it well. So, when Kenneth was here and, he was a little disgruntled and disconcerted with some of the things that Dr. McFeel was saying, and we saw that heated conversation, I said to him quietly, it's not as if Dr. McFeel wants to hammer people down. Look at the core of his discussion. He wants what is right, and what is right requires courage to implement. What he wants are leaders who are willing to not only talk the talk but walk the walk. And I'm not saying that criticizing anyone. So I said to Kenneth, don't listen to the heat in his voice. Listen to the substance of what he's trying to communicate. And Kenneth agreed. We need to get to that place where we hush the noise and move forward and try to listen to what we're trying to say. We've got to open those lines of communication. But I just feel, I suspect, like many others, is that, maybe it won't be in my lifetime when we get to that place where we can have a conversation that is inclusive that is sensible and it's not underscored by people's egos. And that's my comment, my closing comment for today.
Okay, Dr. McPhail.
Well, it's obvious that our country is run by the psychology of bigger and indifferent is better than finding practical solutions. It is a culture of who knows who and not what people can do. It is not a culture of meritocracy. It's a culture of you shake my hand, I shake your hand, you slap my back, I slap your back, and the same old system goes on from generation to generations. I remember, I keep saying that the Constitution gives us the power and the authority to regulate who comes, who goes, what they can do, what kind of business they can have in the Cayman Islands if they're not Caymanians. That's what I have been preaching and say, implement the constitutional provisions that we have. The Constitution also says that there shall be district councils. And the Constitution also says that if we pass a law to say that everybody in the public service have to be Caymanians, that is not discriminatory against other people who are not Caymanians. I do not understand why is it that we have such a poor caliber of people, some people elected. And it bothers me because we have never had this kind of constitution before that propels us into 21st century without having to go into independence. Mm-hmm. And when I hear all kind of excuses from some politicians, well, the premier says this and the premier says that and the premier is not going to implement this law because it's wrong or because something is bad in it. Well, you are politicians. You have been chasing the bus. You have been chasing the bus. The seat in the Legislative Assembly is like the dog chasing the bus on the highway. The bus has stopped now. You need to get on to the bus and see what you are going to do with the bus. At least put your people in the bus and drive them to the direction that they want to go. And it's not what direction you want to go, because I just cannot understand how people can get away with taking all this money in salaries and a pension guaranteed after working for 4 years. When people have to work 30 and 40 years and some don't have a pension, mm-hmm. and you were telling them that, well, their business is your priority. No, that's what I have been saying. It seems to me that this is the weakest bunch of politicians. Some of them are the weakest bunch of politicians ever elected in this country. And, we get what we pay for. We get what we pay for. And we have allowed too many people to come in who should not be in the country, especially those people who are workers, because one side of the country says we want them to have to make more money, to have a better bottom line, and one side is suffering because of that. Today, Mr. Bryan had to leave urgently to go to a so-called strike, I understand, at the Ritz-Carlton.
No, at the Westin.
At the Westin. Well, that in itself should tell the young man that everything is not right in this country. But what it does, it tells me that the Cayman Islands is catching up with the rest of the world. When you treat people like they have done after slavery, when you look at what happened during the slavery days, when the masters who were forced to give up their slaves got paid for working people for all the generation without money, and the slaves got nothing, and then they fostered a way to allow the slaves to work for little money. They call it an apprenticeship. And then when that didn't work, Sligo came down and freed everybody. Well, that was then. And the same system still exists today, where you have all of these people into the country working for little money. And some of the slave masters now want me and you who go to their establishment to give tips to them, to pay them the salary through tips. That is terrible, and And it reminds me of what some of our politicians said in the old days. Cayman is not for everyone. It's not for everybody. And we can't take in everybody. And that's the problem that we have to face. Who are we going to take in? Who are we going to select to come here to live forever? And that is something that I would ask every politician to bear into mind. They have children. They have grandchildren. I know some of them don't care about Cayman Islands because some of them have their homes in Lake Tahoe or in Costa Rica or someplace when the wind blows, they can get on the flight and they can move, just like what happened in I-1. But there some of us here who this is our home. We have been here for generations and generations, and something ought to be done. And that's the reasons why I have been so hard on the young people who say they understand this situation, say they're educated enough to understand and read their society, and I believe that they do not have the ability to understand, or if they do not have the ability, they do not have the knowledge to be able to move the country forward.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dr. McPhail. I was doing a little search here real quickly to find section 66. Okay. To find, it says, talks about prohibited immigrants in our elections law. But I'll do that for Friday. I'll do the research on it, because there's a part that talks about prohibited immigrants, and then there's a part that talks about
immigration law.
Immigration law, and then talks about deportation orders as well, and we will talk about that. Folks, I want to thank you, our listening and our viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension, For the Record, into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to thank Mr. Kenneth Bryan for being here this morning, as well as Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve McPhail. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There is always someone out there who is less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want or even those who crave. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for Talk Today. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay safe. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands.